Hi, I'm Justin.
Also, I hate the way my voice sounds, so if you can do whatever Photoshop does to voices, make me sound awesome.
And this is my lovely friend,
The beauty in the eyes of the beholder, and it's just about getting into the seat of being the beholder.
Hayley.
I don't think you have to be particularly perceptive. I just think you have to look up.
This podcast is mostly just her telling me stories.
If you expose yourself to the possibility that this might be really awkward, there can be something just really cool on the other side of it.
She thinks that her life and way of looking at things are
Oh, I was kind of waiting on you. I thought you were getting your stuff ready. You're waiting on me?
pretty normal.
You got to edit out all the misinformation about the Amish.
Maybe you can relate.
I would like a chance to re-sing the Amish Paradise.
If you want lighthearted stories
All right, you want to talk about goats?
and stream of consciousness,
I just woke up and needed some friends, and so I bought them.
then you're going to like the Sunny Side Up podcast.
Sunny side up, sunny side up, sunny side up, sunny side up.
So, if you're at all like me, you may feel that you're living in a world that can be a bit overwhelming and confusing at times. I'm also a huge fan of podcasts, documentaries, docudramas, stories, and of just information in general. Between all of that and the social media and news, sometimes our brains can feel like they're on overload. Hayley and I hope that this podcast can be something of an antidote to all of that. Like little jello shots of joy and distraction. None of it is too serious or really too informative. Mostly it's just two friends who have conversational chemistry talking about whatever enters the minds of relatively ADHD people. We hope you enjoy.
Oh, I sent you an article or a meme or something about this, and it was blaming public schools or
Yes.
something. We're so regimented that it weeds it out. And I don't know if that's true or not. I think it's true. It's got a lot to do with it. We definitely don't foster.
So yeah,
creativity
it
in
was
the system.
basically the story was that how young were kids? 2, 3, 4, 5?
Oh, I don't remember any of this as specifics. I just remember the general concept being that creativity is genius.
Right.
And we have a way of stifling that because we just send people through this production line
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
cookie cutter
Totally.
process. And we don't reward the creativity and we don't give it any room to blossom. So we're basically choking it out. It's withering away like the succulents that you can keep alive, but I cannot.
Yeah, my succulent is a bomb. No, yeah, I think the article was they did a study, and I wish I could remember the age of kids, but let's say 3 to 4 or 5, like fairly young, and they rated like 90% of them, maybe. I don't remember. It was a really high number. It could have been even north of 90, but maybe it was sub 90, but high, as genius level creativity.
Yeah. That's okay.
Right? And
yeah, it's coming
then
back
at
to
the
me.
end of 12th grade, it had dropped down to, it was under 20%, maybe under 10%. It was, whatever had happened, it was this. And so the question is like, are kids just inherently genius level creativity? And it's just like a natural loss? Or is there something that we're doing societally
To drain that.
like crush it? And yeah, I mean, I'm biased, but definitely feels like, and I don't know what it's such a tough thing to answer because like public school 100 years ago was such a big improvement in so many ways over, kind of no real options or very limited scattered options for only certain people. So, but then now in the age that we live in, when I feel like creativity is coming back around again, where, during the industrial age, it probably was most helpful to the titans of industry and to the average worker. You don't need to be super creative in the truest sense of it. You just need it to be like a good
Rule follower.
rule follower, like show up at work, punch
Okay.
your time clock. Right, okay. So for the industrial age, it could be argued that we only need a handful of like Fords to be the inventors and, Edisons and Teslas to be the inventors, and then let the rest of humankind just, follow the
worker
dang
bees.
rules, be good worker bees.
Okay.
But, go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say, in final thought, I do think that age is now horizoned, and we're going into some other age. I'm not even sure like what to call this age. Is it the age of technology? But I really think because of the insane pace at which technology is advancing, the only thing you can give to your kids is like, be creative. Let's see, how to think. You can't tell them what to think because a machine can give them answers. Like you've seen me use Google a couple times to give me answers. It can do any math problem. It can write for you, all that. So it's really about how to think properly, and creativity are kind of going to be like the things that are left as like what are important human capabilities. And I don't think the public school system as it stands fosters that. It's still like it's lagging behind in an era that I think we've left.
Okay, fair enough. What if the problem is not public schools or mass schooling, whatever?
Yeah.
Because we all agree that we want a minimum level of education for our population.
Agreed.
We want them all to have that. So it's not it's not that schools are the issue. What if it is the educational model? Because historically, you get teachers in the classroom who are teaching by telling you what you're doing wrong instead of teaching and pointing you towards what you're good at or encouraging. What if instead of only discouraging, which is
right,
kind of the default, we emphasize teachers as encouragers more? And dude, it's so hard to try to teach people things and also encourage them along the way.
Know.
So maybe the public school's not the problem. It's that we've stopped being encouraging in that capacity. Because here's the thing that happened to me.
Yeah.
Whenever I was in college, I had a teacher, and I took her for 2 classes actually, and I made really good grades in both classes.
Yeah.
But she, it was history classes, so lots of papers and midterm and final. And on my papers, she gave me such low marks, and she's like, "You are a terrible writer."
What?
And it was not even like that. Might have been word for word what she said. She was like, "You are a terrible writer, and if you think that you want to ever pursue further education, you should go back and do some remediation to learn basic writing skills before you proceed, because you won't be successful." And I was like, okay, thank you for that feedback.
Huh.
And then I left her class, graduated immediately, like that summer, and went straight into law school, and then went back and got a master's degree. Other professors have asked me, "Would you like to have this published? If you ever get interested, I'll help you publish it." Like, other professors were extremely encouraging about this thing that she said was so bad that I had no future if I didn't go back and fix it, which I didn't go back and fix it. So
yeah,
if I had only listened to her, probably would have stopped in my tracks. But I always had other people around that were encouragers.
And then what's the fine balance between encouraging someone, which is 100% amazing and beautiful, and then the people who are like just telling you what you want to hear, but there's no constructive.
I'm afraid I'm that. Like, what if I'm that person? I might be that person. I like to see people happy, so I'll tell them what makes them happy instead of what they need to hear.
Right. Yeah. And then there's no like improvement in real areas. That's a tricky one.
It's hard for me because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I really respect people who are good at giving that critical feedback.
Yep.
I feel like your wife does a good job of that.
She's incredible at it.
She can keep it real without breaking somebody's spirit.
Yes.
But she refuses to pump somebody up with hot air.
Yeah,
and I'm like, I'll pump you up with hot air. And I just want to see that smiling face.
That's right. You may be an idiot, but you're going to be a happy idiot. Yeah. No, I feel you on a deep level. It's something I've been learning from her over the 10 years or so I've been with her. Not quite 10 years, but close. I think that there's like, gosh, if I was to put try to like fast forward hat on, whether this will happen, anytime in the next couple of decades, I don't know. But back to your point, I think 5th grade is probably as far as we need to go with how things are now in terms of everybody needs to read.
A basic.
Read, write, arithmetic, the 3 R's.
Yeah, I didn't learn anything new in high school that I hadn't already learned by about 5th grade. As far as English and history goes, maybe got some more technical skills in the sciences.
Yeah.
But we did get a little more technical with sciences, so I'll give that. And math, but guess what?
Nobody needs math.
I did not use
unless you're an engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you are going to be STEM careers, then keep on trucking. But for those liberal arts minded souls like me, dip out around 5th grade and go find yourself a good apprenticeship.
Well, I was going to say, God, that's perfect. So yeah, I would say if I was to reform, if I was just to like on a whim reform everything today, mandatory traditional schooling stops at 5th grade, and then with the assist of like technology, where you can cater a little bit more to an individual, and this would probably take a big investment in like VR headsets and the type of educating that would be impactful for each person, but like apprenticeships, focus on particular things that interest you. So let's say after 5th grade, you're like, dang, I'm really fascinated by history or by math or by cosmetology or by whatever it is. Really start letting kids take that first
Thanks for not saying Taylor Swift.
What's that?
I said, thank you for not saying Taylor Swift.
Oh, yeah, Taylor Swift. If you want to say Taylor Swift, right, whatever it is, and really go down that path, I think that would be... And along the way, again, you're teaching kids how to think, and you're teaching ultimately creativity because you can't predict where we're going to go. I don't know. It seems like that would be a much better way. Because honestly, the apprenticeship thing is kind of genius. It's just kind of genius.
Well, and too many other cultures use that basic model, and even throughout history, like it wasn't a terrible thing to set aside. Like the Industrial Revolution set us on a different path, but I'm not sure that was necessarily a thing that we needed to depart from. I don't know that we had to.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. Everything's going to be, obviously, I feel like we're in the next 20, 30 years, everything's going to get completely rearranged from the way we've done things. We're just in that weird transition period where everything's broken, and it's like we're all puzzling through of like, how do we fix this world that is not working in the way that it should? So, yeah. But education is just one of the many strings that needs to be pulled and probably completely rethought through. Yeah.
I don't think that our feminism waves that you were talking about before would have made it had it not been for the Industrial Revolution, though, because you think, like, regardless of what it did to the education system, like that factory system and giving women a chance to get out of the house, like none of the
World War II actually did that.
Which wouldn't have happened on the way that it did without the Industrial Revolution preceding it. But
right.
all of the factory systems, the interchangeable parts, and all of those situations giving women a doorway into the workforce and out of the house, and then deciding if they want to be there or not, or if they should be there or not, and all of these other things. Would we still, women, be just barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen had we not had an Industrial Revolution?
It's probably like when you look at like there's some it's called not thermodynamics, it's called something dynamics. Can't think what it's. Yeah, there's some theory of like humans evolution, not like we came from tadpoles, which I think is stupid, but it's much more. It's called some kind of. Anyways, but it's about the evolution of the way as a species we've evolved. And in that, whatever that theory is, you're probably right that you can't skip the step of Industrial Revolution. The downside of Industrial Revolution was
pollution.
Well, yeah,
the breakdown of the traditional family structure.
That was going to go there.
I was going to keep guessing because I thought you were going somewhere else.
Breakdown of the family, because there's this really interesting podcast a friend of mine shot to me, and then now Ali and Reggie and a couple other people have listened to, and it's like, I don't know, it's just really fascinating. This guy, it's a Christian podcast. The host is Christian, and then the interviewee is Christian, and he makes this startling statement that the family, what is the word they used? The core family, what is the word they bandy about? The phrase nuclear. Thank you. The nuclear family unit, which has been proposed to us as like the beginning and end all, and really since like the 50s forward, is actually a bit of an illusion historically, and also biblically. It's not
Sure.
what the focus is. Yeah. So he goes back through, like, again, what our ancestors, how they would have thought about it, and then kind of uses like biblical narrative and builds this picture of essentially somewhere in the Industrial Revolution time, around like after World War II especially, we started honing this thing down to like there was a man and a woman who were married and a couple of kids, and they were their own like island. And that was kind of, and it becomes this very lonely, especially for men, becomes this incredibly lonely, isolating world where you're going out away from home. You're not on a farm. You're not working with your kids. And you're being isolated in this dirty, nasty, hard condition, doing a job that nobody can understand. And you're only really needed for your ability to produce. And there's the separation from what you're doing from if you left your wife at home and now she's doing these things here, where at least on the farm, there was such a collaboration where, you know, if I'm the farmer and you're the farmer's wife, there's such a like, I go out and because I'm stronger physically, I go do like the crop bring in, but then you're taking that crop and jarring it and prepare. There's such a like a cohesiveness in the work.
The interdependence.
Yeah, there's an interdependency. And so like, yeah, the Industrial Revolution brings this isolation of the quote unquote nuclear family as the highest and best order. And yeah, his whole proposal is that essentially down through the ages, our ancestors starting, you know, up until maybe 150 years ago, when you saw a family picture, it was 20 to 50 people packed into that picture, kind of like the one we have over our mantle for Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Right? And it's generational. It's the aunts and the uncles and the grandmas and the grandpas on both sides, the moms, dads, tons of children. And if the family was of any like social whatever and they had a business, you would see like the workers and their families. And if there was, servants and, other people involved in whatever the operation, all included in this big family picture. It was like this big, like multi-generational unit. And anyways, he just went on, of course, talk about, it's like when God refers to himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob or whatever it is. It's multi-generational. Yeah. And I don't know, it got me thinking about this of like, I think I don't know that we could have skipped this step of the Industrial Revolution. So I don't want to like totally pee on it now that we're definitely out of that world now. Because it brought us a lot of really good things, but it definitely isolated us. It definitely, like, especially for men's mental health, and then for the family in general, just kind of broke us. And it left us all, men, women, children, everybody, lonelier, more self-absorbed. I mean, the whole thing, just kind of the ultimate kind of end of it. And that's why it's sort of ending now, I think, in so many ways. Is
trying to go back to a communal.
We're going to have to.
Okay.
Because we're wired for it.
Are you familiar with the Jewish kibbutz? I don't even know if that's how you pronounce it.
Kibbutz.
I had no idea what those were until the October 7th situation, and I was like, what is this? What is this? But the communal living, have you ever really looked at what they're doing there?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, obviously my heritage from my mom's side is Jewish, and so I know a little bit about kibbutzes.
Okay. I just Wikipedia'd it. So this is just a really generic thing, but it's like communal living, and they are – the thing that caught my attention about it is because they're just like cooperatively living and sharing this plot of earth, and everybody's got the men and women have their own house, but they're working together or cooking together and eating together, like, in a little cafeteria or whatever. It's a smaller – it's not a huge society, but it's larger than just your nuclear family unit.
100%.
But the thing that I thought was kind of fascinating about it was it felt a little bit like The Giver, because they had an idea. When was this? Maybe in the 40s or 50s. This is an old memory I'm just relying on, so do your own Wikipedia research. But was
The Giver a movie or
both? It was a book. Lois Lowry wrote a book, and it was like young adult literature, but they have made a movie about it, but it was your typical slightly dystopian, like alternate, and here's the way it's structured. And in the book, everybody has an assigned task, and you're given this assignment, but one person's assigned task where everybody else is a laborer or raising a baby, like nurses or whatever. This one person would be tasked with receiving all the memories of the way things used to be done. And it was their burden to carry all this knowledge and all these memories and, the colors that used to be available that are no longer available, that kind of thing. Okay. It was an interesting book. It was a good book. But in the kibbutz, they decided at some point, maybe the 40s or 50s, some of them decided what would happen if if the child raising wasn't necessarily done within the nuclear family unit. So the husband and wife would have a baby, but and for the sake of complete gender equality is actually, I think, was what the purpose was. They would bring the baby to a place where it was staffed with teachers and nurses, and they would receive the baby and raise the baby. And I'm talking about like even at nighttime, they would keep it. The parents would come by after their work shift and visit with the child in the evenings, maybe have dinner with the child in their little cafeteria set up, and then the parents would go back home.
Weird.
The men and the women, because everybody deserves a good night's sleep, and the child would be left in this little children's society home where the nurses and teachers raise it. And there's a generation of people who are now adults who were raised in that, and some of them were like, yep, I thought that was a good working model, I'll continue to do that. And then some of them were like, you know what, I'm not so sure. I've decided to raise my children in a nuclear family unit. Yeah. It was the most interesting little Wikipedia read that I've ever had, and I really want to unpack that with somebody who has an actual experience with it, because to us, or at least to me, because I've only read about alternate societies through the lens of a book that feels a little bit scary, because those things were always presented as different and weird and bad, and only the person who remembers the old way is normal. No, in this place, it was like, okay, the whole point was so that women would have an equal access to having a life that they choose, of working, doing the things that they want to do, and going home and getting a good night's sleep instead of being the one getting up with a kid all night. No shady, scary Hunger Games type reasoning for why it's structured this way. It's fascinating, and I've never heard of it until now.
And I don't think I was aware of the communal raising of the kids. Although that makes perfect sense.
Not all kibbutzes adopted that.
Absolutely, that makes sense. I haven't heard of that piece of it, but I would love to know the data on and some of the feedback on that, because that is a very fascinating idea. And tribally, like going back many generations. Let's face it, the mothers, typically the older women who weren't able to move around as much.
Exactly.
Right. The grandmas sort of were in charge of taking care of the kids during the day.
While the moms did the...
They were washing the clothes, or they were...
And the structure makes sense.
It does. Yeah, there is a structure to it. Yeah. And I could see from that point of view, and just community, period. That idea is scary to us now, because we're scared of our neighbors, and we're just all the things that make us so individual. Like, we're hyper individualistic here. So that stuff just seems like crazy town to us, but it's such an interesting,
and a lot of pressure to choose the right vocation, because if you feel like your passion is nursing or teaching, you're going to be nursing or teaching around the clock, and fairly exclusively that. I mean, I'm sure they take breaks and everything else. Sure. It's not like a sweatshop or anything. But to the extent that if you, in our experience, you choose a career because it'll pay the bills, and it may not be your actual life's passion. You're just this is what is available in my small town, and this is how I can make ends meet, and this is what I'm going to do. But like, you better choose the right thing, because could you imagine saying, I'll do teaching just because it's available, and then having to live with all the children in the town?
Terrible.
Oh my gosh.
I'd be like,
vote me off of this island.
I went off. Interesting, that podcast, kind of looping back to the Jews. I think, God, there has not been nearly enough done to study the Jews in the most respectful but serious sociological way of trying to understand why they're the most successful people group in the world, and what makes them that way. It's not an accident. It's by design, and trying to understand them better. And I was just sharing. Well, in the podcast, he talked about the huge advantage that Jewish children have over, let's say, your average run-of-the-mill American kiddo, is their identity is handed to them. This is the Jewish kid. Their identity is handed to them, and they know that, like, my great-great-great-great-great zillion great-backs grandfather was Abraham. And then going forward, like, I have the stories of who we are as a people, what we've done, our place in the world. And you're handed that from a pretty young age. So he was saying that most, like, American kiddos, when they hit 18 years old and they're going off to college, or even starting before that, there is this multi-year quest that can last for 4 to 6, sometimes to 8 years of quote unquote finding yourself. And he talks about, like,
or to age 41.
Right. What an incredible waste of time that is.
Yeah.
So he's like, because the Jewish tradition gives them that of, like, no, this is who you are. What you do, like your occupation, that's a different thing. But who you are down to your core, like what you're a part of, and the meaning that has, like, you're handed that. So that's rock solid for you, theoretically. And now you can go spend your valuable brain space on other things. I was like, dang, it's a really good point. But on such a practical note, like, one of the things that blew me away when I was in commercial real estate for a little while, working for my youngest brother, James, and so he's in commercial real estate, and a couple times a year he would do these dinners where he'd bring together either current clients, former clients, or people he would like to work with, right? So we'd get together. It'd be a big, beautiful, expensive dinner. He'd always pick a really cool place, and he would obviously, there'd be a little bit of chatter about, the company Yale, which is his company, and, like, the services we offer. But most of it was just letting people have a good time and talk with each other. And it's a great marketing thing to, like, just let people, eat a meal and enjoy other people that are in the same space. So I'm at this table, and I'm sitting with this kid who's probably in his mid-20s, I'd say, like 26, 27. I didn't immediately know he was Jewish because he was a big boy. Kind of college football player built guy. And we're chatting, and I said something to him like, I don't remember. I was trying to get to know him, get to know his life a little bit better. And he's like, I'm just the luckiest guy. And I was like, tell me about that. And he's like, well, I work for my uncle over there. I was like, okay. And he's like, I've got this incredible job. And he was telling me, like, just what he gets to do at such a young age. And it was just insane, like the opportunities that he was currently enjoying and what was coming. And he said, what's amazing to me is because he says we celebrate Shabbat every week. He said every week for all those years, he said, I didn't know this, but I was sitting with a billionaire. I didn't know he was a billionaire. My uncle, his uncle's a billionaire, but he said, I sat with every week, did Shiva, did Shabbat, sorry. Shiva's for death. Did Shabbat for 24 hours with him and all this big family. And I just got to know him as this nice, kindly, older uncle. And he said, I did the thing like most American kids do. I went to college. I was a bigger guy. I decided to play football. It was really fun. And I figured out towards the end of, like, my college run that was as far as I was going to go. I was never going to go NFL. I wasn't that good. I was good enough to have a fun time in college. And he said, I got out, and like most college kids, I had no idea what to do. So here I am in my early 20s, at like 22, and around the table, with all of this giant family around me, I'm like, hey, I don't know what to do with my life. Does anybody have any ideas? And I now discover billionaire uncle, who knows me since I was, peeing in a diaper, is like, hey, would you like to come to work for my company? And he's like, yeah, remind me again what you do. And, I do commercial real estate, blah, 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 blah. And it was a no-brainer. And now this kid's, a multimillionaire or whatever he is, or is on his way to being a multimillionaire, I'm sure. And I was just like, dang, the Jews do it again. It's just the most freaking brilliant thing where for 24 hours every week, you don't do anything. You stay in the house, you drink, you eat, and you argue about Torah, sports, and politics. That's it. And you just get to know each other at that level. And like the family unit is so much more strengthened because it's not just a mom and a dad. And then you have the multi-generational passing of wisdom and wealth and
the redistribution of wealth.
100%.
Like,
100%.
the structure that God gave the Hebrew people is a very, very good structure for living if you implement it the way He recommended.
Agreed. It's
like,
genius.
Yeah, and why we get away from it. But you remember earlier you had mentioned the disdain for Obama at the time that he was in office because of the way that we had been raised and the influences that we were hearing. And then down the road in hindsight, we're like, oh my gosh, we were so lucky bringing him back.
Right.
Because of, you don't know what you don't know. Same treatment of Bernie Sanders. And everybody was like, oh, he's so radical, he's so left-leaning, he's a socialist, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Tell me why Bernie Sanders is the most reflective of the structure that God gave the Hebrew people of anybody I've seen in politics lately. And I don't think he sets out to be that way. I don't know what his religious leanings or convictions are, but he's looking more at here is a more fair system or more equal system and the redistribution of wealth. And that is not to say that he represents a Jewish system or anything. I've not looked at it that closely. But just in passing, looking back and saying, like, why did I reject all of that with such fervency back in my conservatively influenced years? And now, after studying the Bible and looking at suggestions that God lays out for people that we overlook so often, and seeing like, okay, my God, the things I was rejecting were things that actually have good biblical foundations. Like, why would we be like, that's never going to work, that's not fair, you'd be rewarding laziness if you redistribute wealth, blah blah blah. God is like, you ain't never going to be stronger than the weakest link in your chain. You might as well focus on the weak.
I think the only pushback on it would be does government do that or does family? I think if family does it, then you're golden. I think when government does it, back to my theory earlier of like, no matter how good the intent is. Like,
government is almost always going to be anti-biblical. Like, I get that. Because, but society. Right. Because the Jewish people were not all, ultimately in an ancestral DNA sort of way. But that was rules for a society and how a society should function.
Fair.
And to that extent,
you're right.
Like,
that's kind of government.
Our capitalist, only the strong survive. Like, we are so far from what was recommended and what seems to be working really well for certain people groups who implement it well. Not an endorsement on any particular ethnic group over another. It was just a casual observation.
No, mine is. Mine is like I know. It's like back to that podcast for the 20th time, but he was talking about, they make up 0.00 or whatever % of the world's population because there's 18 to 20 million of them, and go into the peace. What am I thinking of? What are the words called? The Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize, the all of the scientific research advancement, and you get into the top echelon, it's like half or more of all of those awards that have ever been given out all go to Jews, and they make up 0.0000% of the population. Like, there's something that they're doing extraordinarily well. That is like, you can either say, oh, it's a conspiracy, which falls apart the second you start thinking about how this teeny
who's
people
giving out all these
like who's helping them. That's insane. Or you can just have the humility to go, oh, they kind of have things figured out a lot better than we do. Let's try to learn a couple things.
The emphasis on certain things. Yeah,
it's fascinating.
Hello, lovely friends. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And it would mean the world if you would tell other people about this podcast and maybe even spam your social media accounts with just how much you're enjoying it. If you are, of course. Also, commenting and rating us on whatever platform you're downloading or streaming from is incredibly helpful to a little startup podcast like this one. On the other hand, if you are dissatisfied with your listening experience, please leave all of that hate on someone else's podcast. Just maybe to confuse them a little bit, right? But most of all, we hope you keep looking up and looking for the sunny side of life.